You've probably heard the name Amityville before, a house infamous for terror, tragedy, and the unexplainable. But what if I told you the real horror didn't start with ghosts? It started with a family, lying in their beds, shot while they slept. 6 people, dead. And the man who did it claimed he heard voices telling him to kill. A year later, a new family moved in, unaware of the darkness waiting inside 112 Ocean Avenue. From the very first night, the house began to change them. Cold spots that couldn't be explained, doors slamming on their own, whispers that made no sense, and every single night, exactly at 3:15 a.m., George Lutz woke up, heart racing, staring into the darkness. What happened in that house isn't just about murders. It's about the way a place can bend your mind, twist your thoughts, and make you question reality itself. Tonight, you're going to hear the full story of what really happened at Amityville, and once you do, you may never look at a house the same way again. If you grew up in the United States, chances are you have heard the name Amityville before. Most people think they know this story. They think it's just another haunted house tale exaggerated by movies and books. But what most people don't realize is that the horror of Amityville didn't begin with ghosts. It began with something far more terrifying. On the night of November 13th, 1974, the town of Amityville, New York was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where even the sound of your own footsteps feels loud. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the air was cold and sharp, biting through jackets. Inside a 2-story Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue, 6 people were sleeping. Ronald DeFeo Sr., Louise DeFeo, and their 4 children. By morning, all 6 of them would be dead. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Ronald DeFeo Jr. walked into Henry's bar, just a few blocks from his home. Witnesses later said he looked pale, shaken, like someone who hadn't slept at all. He was shouting, "Someone shot my parents!" The bartender immediately called the police. When officers arrived at 112 Ocean Avenue, they were not prepared for what they would find. Each member of the DeFeo family had been shot execution-style while lying in their beds. No signs of struggle, no screams reported by neighbors, no forced entry, 6 gunshots, 6 bodies, and somehow no one heard anything. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was arrested later that day. Within hours, he confessed. He said he heard voices that told him to do it. After the murders, the house sat empty. Locals avoided it. Kids crossed the street to avoid walking past it. People said the windows always looked dark, even during the day. But in December 1975, barely a year later, a new family moved in. The Lutz family. George Lutz, his wife Kathy, and Kathy's 3 children. They bought the house at a price that seemed too good to be true, because it was. From the very first night, something felt wrong. George Lutz later said the house felt cold, no matter how high they turned the heat. Doors slammed on their own. A strange smell filled the rooms. And every single night at 3:15 a.m., George woke up, the same time the DeFeo murders were believed to have happened. At first, he thought it was stress. Then the nightmares started. George dreamed of the DeFeo children standing at the foot of his bed, staring at him. Not screaming, not crying, just staring. And then he started to change. Neighbors noticed it first. George stopped shaving. He stopped going to work. He spent hours staring into the fireplace, sometimes smiling, sometimes whispering. Kathy said she felt like the house was turning her husband into someone else. The children began waking up with unexplained bruises. Their youngest daughter claimed she had an imaginary friend named Jody. Jody was a pig, with red, glowing eyes. Kathy said she once saw it standing outside her daughter's bedroom window on the 2nd floor. There were no footprints, no ladder, just glowing eyes in the dark. A local priest came to bless the house. As he walked through the hallway, he felt an intense pressure on his chest. He later said he heard a voice whisper, "Get out." When he opened his eyes, the room was filled with flies in the middle of winter. The priest never returned. The walls bled, not metaphorically. Red liquid seeped from the cracks. The house shook. The children screamed. George picked up the axe. And for a moment, Kathy thought history was about to repeat itself. From the moment the Lutz family moved in, the house felt occupied. Not haunted in the way movies show it. It was worse. It felt like living inside a place that was already aware of you. George said the silence inside the house felt intentional, like the building was listening, waiting for someone to speak first. At night, the sounds of the neighborhood disappeared completely. No dogs, no cars, just the slow ticking of the clocks. The house never felt asleep. George didn't wake up screaming or panicking. His eyes simply opened every night at 3:15 a.m. He would stare at the ceiling, fully awake, heart steady, as if his body had learned something his mind hadn't yet accepted. Sometimes he felt pressure on his chest, sometimes a sense of dread so strong it made him nauseous. He never told Kathy at first, because once you say something out loud, it becomes real. The change in George wasn't sudden. That's what made it terrifying. He didn't become violent. He became indifferent. Bills went unpaid. Phone calls unanswered. He stopped reacting when the kids cried. Kathy said it felt like watching someone slowly unplug from reality, one emotion at a time. Sometimes he sat in silence for hours, staring at nothing. When asked what he was thinking about, he always gave the same answer. Nothing. Children adapt faster than adults. They stopped asking questions. They stopped complaining. They learned which rooms felt wrong and avoided them without being told. One of the children began sleepwalking. Another started wetting the bed again. No one talked about it. The house rewarded silence. When the priest arrived, the house felt different. Not angry, alert. He paused in the hallway and said he felt dizzy. His voice echoed strangely, as if the house were larger on the inside than it should have been. He never finished the blessing. Later, he would admit that standing there felt like being somewhere you were never meant to enter. Nothing dramatic happened next. And that was the point. Life continued. Dinner was cooked. Kids went to school. George chopped wood. But everything felt slightly off, like reality was misaligned by a few inches. Kathy said it felt like the house was slowly convincing them this was normal. The thought didn't arrive suddenly. It slipped in quietly. George imagined how easy it would be to make everything stop. No stress, no noise, no fear. The thought scared him, but not as much as it should have. On the last night, nothing supernatural happened. No voices, no bleeding walls, just a heavy, unbearable tension. George stood in the hallway holding an axe, not because something told him to, but because part of him believed it made sense. That was the moment Kathy understood. They were not being attacked. They were being influenced. They left before sunrise. No screaming, no chaos, just quiet fear. George never looked back at the house. Some doors are dangerous to remember. Maybe the house was haunted. Maybe it wasn't. But places where extreme violence happens leave marks, not on the walls, on the people. And sometimes, that kind of horror doesn't need ghosts at all.